His Holiness, the Sakyong. And Yogarupa Rod Stryker.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, our esteemed panelists. And without further ado, we'll start off with this. I'd like to talk about lineages and teachers. And Rod, could you help us give us an idea of sort of your lineage and the teachers that, and what your feelings were toward the teachers in that lineage?
My spiritual roots go back, my traditions go back to Adi Shankara, one of the great sages, so in the history of India, not the globe. And I know Deepak and I have this in common, actually. Within his teachings, there are traditions and sub-traditions. So we represent some of his sub-traditions. And, to speak to my feeling of it, that's a very overwhelming thing to try and describe. In the same way you have a difficult time describing the love you have for your children, it would be hard to convey it completely. I feel the same toward my teachers and the teachers of my teachers. There are many blessings in my life, not least of which from my family, but everything is brought to life through the gift of my teachers. And so there really are no words to describe my gratitude and the fullness that it brings to my life.
And Ricochet?
What was the question?
About the lineage and your teacher. How do you feel about your teacher, and maybe describe a little the Shambhala lineage?
I think just being here, I was just feeling just a great appreciation for this event and just being here with our friends and distinguished panelists and all of you. I feel that lineage is something that's not particularly in the past, even though it's continuity, but I feel it's very present in everything that I experience, especially when you're doing meditation and yoga. There's a sense of it really being very much alive. And I think that's part of the power for myself. It's a living lineage. It's not just sort of ancestor related, but there's a sense of strength, I would say, that you're doing something that has been continued in the course of people's lives. And one of the most important things or strengths I draw from it is that almost every lineage figure that I have the privilege of hearing about their life is almost all of them had a really difficult time, and that they really overcame a lot, and there's a sense of their perseverance. And it was their perseverance and their sense of sort of dedication that allowed the lineage to continue, or that tradition to continue. So it's almost, you feel a sense of gratefulness, because otherwise, if they didn't do what they did, you wouldn't be doing this. And so there's a real sense of appreciation. So I think it's interesting, because a lot of times in our modern culture, everything's about new, but also there's a sense of really, it can also be appreciation for how we got here.
And Deepak?
I think everything's been said, but since you asked me the question, my lineage, like Rod Stryker's, is Adi Shankara. For those of you who don't know who he was a child prodigy. Started seeking enlightenment at the age of 4, and before he passed on, took what they call Mahasamadhi, the big meditation. He established 4 centers, one in the north, one in the south, one in the east, and one in the west of India. This is 800 AD. So my teacher was Maharishi Maheshwari. My direct transmission was from Maharishi Maheshwari, who was directly part of that lineage. Afterwards, I also engaged with the Shankaracharya of Jyotirmati, the monastery in the north. And then during the last 20 years, I've been deeply influenced by other teachers who are offshoots of the same lineage. So one of them is Nisargadatta Maharaj, and if anyone wants to get direct transmission through a book, please read it. I am that, Nisargadatta Maharaj. And the other one was Ramana Maharishi in the south of India. And the third one was Atmananda Krishna.
You know, almost everybody in the room, Deepak, meditates. Everyone here meditates almost. But we want to know why you meditate.
I try to live in meditation. So I think meditation can be a good ritual, and it helps for so many reasons. We've done a lot of research at our center, partly funded by you and Gina and many others on the board, but we were able to show that in a 5.5-day retreat of meditation that we do twice a year, the telomerase level, the enzyme that regulates the length of your chromosomes, went up by 40%, which means that there was an effect on the genetic clock which is responsible for aging. But furthermore, we were also able to see that all the genes that cause homeostasis or self-regulation or healing, for lack of a better word, went up some 17-fold, and other genes that cause inflammation went down significantly. There's no drug that can do that. And this study was funded by supporters of the Chopra Foundation, including the Murdochs and many others, and I see some of them in the audience. It was in collaboration with Harvard, UCSD, Duke University, UCSF. One of the investigators, along with us, was a Nobel laureate, Elizabeth Blackburn. The paper was published in Nature, which is the highest impact journal you can imagine, and it actually brought, along with other studies like this, meditation to the mainstream, because direct effect on biology, the human brain, genetics. But that's not why we meditate. We meditate to get in touch with reality.
And Rinpoche, why do you meditate?
I think for myself, meditation is very much sort of very human activity. And I think that one of the most sort of essential elements of meditation is that one's innate strength and goodness is already sort of within oneself. So I see meditation as a process of sort of allowing for that strength of who we are. And I think we're in an interesting time because there's a lot of devaluing of the humanness, and I think there's a real question about, are we good? Are we as people? And I think meditation has always come from the point of view that our own enlightenment, our own wakefulness, our own strength is within our own mind and heart. And meditation, I think, is just that process of personally experiencing that. And from that point of view, even if it's a very brief meditation, it's connecting with that. So it's connecting with something that's inherent, that's not really describable, but you have to experience it. So I think it's a practice, but it's not a practice in repetition. But it's more a practice in like genuineness or authenticity. So you actually feel, in a non-conceptual way, who you are.
You're accessing your true self.
Your true non-self.
I think, Deepak, it was you that said a lot of suffering is caused by confusing the selfie with the self.
This thing that you call the body mind is your selfie.
Yeah. Why do you meditate?
I think the simple answer as to why I meditate is it has had such a profound effect on me. And if I were to be completely honest, I would say that the interest in seeking it out was the result of pain, suffering. My good fortune was that I became aware of my suffering at a fairly young age. And so at 18, I was already trying to find something, I was in pursuit of something, or sensing there was something that the world would not provide, no matter how successful or no matter how much I would accumulate or what I would accumulate. But there was something that the world wouldn't provide, and I intuitively, I think, knew that. So what began perhaps as a way to find the way out of pain or suffering was ultimately became a way of discovering and reclaiming the greatest treasure. There's this teaching in the Shiva Sutras. The concept is Maharada, and it means the great pool. And there's this description of, in between lifetimes, we catch a glimpse of the glory of the self, which is said to be this golden pool. And it's so awe-inspiring that we recoil, because it's somehow our small identity can't quite fathom that this is us. And we get this glimpse. And then that leaves an impression where for when we become embodied, when we have body, is we seek out that remembrance, that re-experience of that. And my tradition says that that's the deepest samskara, is the samskara of the hunger to see oneself again. And meditation becomes the vehicle.
Yeah, when I think of yogis and Buddhists, I see so much, that so many things that are similar, so many things that share purpose, share definition. And one of them is the foundation of yoga, in part, is to attenuate the influence of the kleshas. Can you talk about that, Rod, a little bit? Is this something that you do with meditation specifically?
Wow, kleshas, that's a small topic. So for those, so we have a similar vocabulary. Those are the causes of affliction, causes of suffering. Deepak actually shared about them last night, and in short, they're born from this one piece that actually dovetails with what I was saying about the Maharada, which is we still are identified with it. We don't identify ourselves as this great pool, this luminous pool of self. And as a result, we begin to create some fictions as a result of that. And there are 5 kleshas, and I don't think it's necessarily the right time to do it. But at the far end of that spectrum of what causes us suffering is the knowledge and the fear of dying. And it doesn't matter what we accomplish in the world, in essence, that fear follows us our whole life. And Patanjali, the great sage of the yoga tradition, says pleasure is suffering and suffering is suffering. In other words, that even when we gain wonderful things, there's a fundamental fear that we're going to lose those wonderful things. So the point being that meditation at its height is a kind of dissolving, or is like a small death, a conscious death. It's really a resolution around all of the things that we're so invested in our life: our friends, our family, our possessions, our goals, our career, our dharma, our duties in the world. And so when we are in the depth of meditation, we interface, or we become that which is beyond dying.
Yeah.
And so if we understand that key point, that we get to see that part of ourselves that's beyond death on a consistent basis, what it starts to do is, to use the word, I think, attenuate. It begins to reduce that fundamental fear of loss, because we become aware of that thing which cannot be destroyed, which cannot be lost. But the teachings are this, and I'll just add one other thing. Patanjali says that it can be attenuated, the kleshas can be attenuated through meditation if they're subtle. In other words, meditation alone is not enough if what's causing us suffering is significant. If it's really strong, we need other things in addition to meditation.
Yeah. My understanding, Rinpoche, is that the Buddha, when he was in Deer Park, was also trying to unravel sort of the mysteries around the kleshas. So what is your view of that?
Well, I think within Buddhist tradition, kleshas are something initially to sort of recognize and overcome, and especially in terms of ignorance, passion, aggression, and that those kleshas are basically holding on to something in terms of level of attachment, aggression in terms of trying to destroy things, and ignorance in terms of not recognizing certain things. And they're seen as sort of states of the mind and expressions of the mind that become very experiential, and in fact can create a whole cycle of life. So kleshas are also connected with the seeds of creating life cycles or realms. So that's so they're not just considered to be sort of minor sort of experiential blockages, but actually create a whole universe. And from that point of view, you have to then understand the essence of that. And then we would say the more sort of advanced or sort of deeper perspective is that you have to understand the nature of the klesha. And within the Buddhist tradition, that's where you get into mandalas and understanding the actual wisdom within the confusion. So that that becomes a path, which is sort of a deeper path. But I think a lot of it is, it's your relation, where you are on the journey of understanding. So if you're very upset, then obviously you just need to calm down. But if you want to understand the nature of that anger, so it doesn't happen again, where you can actually understand why is it that you're angry, that becomes much deeper understanding.
Deepak, do you see meditation not only as well-being and having a better life, but part of that whole thing originated with dealing with suffering, as a tool to deal with suffering and to uncover the source of suffering?
Just to elaborate on what's already been said, how many people, just I'm curious, know anything about the life of the Buddha? Oh, of course. So you know that he was a young prince, and he happened to be in a very Aspen-like environment. And it was actually Aspen Plus. Because, he was not exposed to old age or suffering at all. He was surrounded by pleasure. And then one day when he went outside his enclosed environment into what is called the real world, he saw an old person, and he asked his friend, who was a stable boy, he said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, that's an old person." He said, "Does everybody get old?" And he said, "Yes." "Will I get old?" "Yes." And then they saw a person who was very disabled in extreme decrepitude, probably a leper. He said, "What's that?" He said, "That's a person with severe decrepitude and disability." He says, "Does that happen to everyone?" He said, "Well, if you live long enough, it does." And the third person they saw was the corpse, actually. It was the corpse being taken to cremation. He said, "What's that?" "That's a dead man. Does everyone die?" And the answer was yes. "Will I die?" "Yes, you will." So that started his search. And, for those of you who don't know, actually I wrote a biography on the Buddha's life, which I'll be happy to send to you, Rinpoche, and Rod and yourself. But he was a great yogi also. He practiced all the yogas, the pranayams, he practiced fasting. It was only when he gave up trying under the Bodhi tree that he found what is called enlightenment. So there's a great message in his teaching, in that you don't go beyond the mind by using the mind. The mind cannot get you to reality. You have to ultimately transcend that mind. and transcend those sanskaras and vasanas and karma actually even, which is part of the conditioned mind.
Could you define karma?
There's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, particularly in the West in these days about karma. Karma is just your conditioned mind. So, every experience that you've had in the past, there's an interpretation of that experience, and that's called a sanskara, and that creates the seeds of desire, or what are called vasanas. So sanskara, vasana, and karma are all the same thing. We keep repeating the same thing over and over again as a result of centuries of conditioning. So everyone's here right now, in this room, in this moment, as a result of karma. Because otherwise you wouldn't be here. There are other people who are in a bar or doing something else. So you are here. Karma creates the conditions of the present moment. But it does not bind you, because you still, depending on your degree of awareness, you have the choice to do what you want to do with the present moment. And the ultimate goal of life is to transcend it altogether.
In my research into your lineage, Rod, one of your teachers wrote a book where his teacher was quoted saying, you need to be conscious and consciously create your karmas, or your karmas will create you. What does that mean?
Well, it's exactly as Deepak described it. It's that our past impressions create desires, and we are likely to. A nice short way of saying it, maybe it'll qualify as a Deepakism or Strykerism. But if you don't choose a different present, the past will choose it for you.
Okay.
And that's really at the heart of it. And that is that we have to be very conscious of shaping the present, because there is an influence of the past. Those are just a few words, be here now, but that's not so simple because of the concept of karma, vasana, and samskara. It would be nice if it was so simple. But Deepak makes the critical point, which is that ultimately it is a choice, because we've chosen those things in the past. And we can extricate ourselves from them by choosing differently in the present.
Well, maybe it's simple, it's just not easy.
That's right. It's simple, not easy.
Yeah, so Rinpoche, how does that sync with the Buddhist tradition and ideas of karma?
Very well.
In the sense, the path of Patanjali is very similar to the path of Buddha.
Well, I guess that's for everyone else to decide, but I think one thing that I was just struck by was the notion of karma, which often, as Deepak is saying, there's sort of sometimes sort of interpretations of what it is. And I think one of the things that is sort of linking karma and meditation is that meditation is really the place in the present moment where you're changing your karma or developing your karma or freeing yourself from karma. And so the power of your meditation is not just recovery time from your life, but it is a point where you begin to determine the trajectory of your life, how you would like to live, what are the principles you would like to live by. And you need that moment of quiet and also a little bit of perspective to determine, do I want to, as we at the conference, like, do you want to lead with love? Do you want to lead with compassion? Do you want to lead with strength? And so the present moment is really like, it's a moment where the future is not really existing at this point, and it's coming into existence very quickly. So meditation can be very powerful in determining, what you do that day, really the direction of your life. And so one of the things that when I teach meditation, try to encourage people is that it looks like you're doing nothing, but there's so much happening. So don't be fooled by inactivity. It looks like, they're just sort of chilling out. And inside, it's powerful. As Chopra said, all the research is showing that there's so much happening. And so the ancient wisdom is catching up with the technology, realizing, this is a powerful human being deciding something. And we as people have decided how the world is right now. And we will decide how it's going to be.
Did you want to add something, Deepak?
Well, just a kind of a metaphor analogy that my teacher Maharishi used to use. So imagine a piece of cloth which is dyed, let's say the color red, and every time you transcend in meditation, any time you get beyond the mind, then you are washing that piece of dyed cloth. So the next time it's a little faded, the color is not that strong, and you keep doing it till finally all the color fades away. So the color is the karma that's slowly being washed away.
That's great. So we talked about meditation. We're going to do a meditation in a few minutes, and I want to know from you, Rinpoche, how important is intention when you begin to meditate?
It's funny you asked that. I mean, as you know, intention is something I feel like before you meditate, even if it's a very simple intention or motivation, because I almost think like motivation is like, meditation is like going for a walk. Why are you going on a walk? Why are you going on a journey? There's a journey taking place, and intention is just orienting yourself. And I think that's where your meditation becomes enriched. A lot of times, if you have no idea where you're meditating, that's where you begin to lose perspective. You can get bored, you get very distracted. Whereas I think if you have attention, it's very much like the energy of the wind, kind of in a positive way, directing you. So motivation is, in the Tibetan tradition, we call it Dawa. Dawa means view, like you're looking at the top of a big mountain and you see where you're going. And the mind is infinite in terms of what it can do. And so the journey of meditation is just actually becoming familiar with your intention, staying with your intention, not constantly changing your intention, but rather staying with it.
Rod, what's your tradition say about intention?
A lot. A lot. But if, I think I'm going to answer the question a little bit differently, and I'm actually going to speak to something that touches on intention, but is a little bit different context. The idea that Rinpoche has just shared, which is the idea that there's context to this practice, there's a reason for doing this practice, is really critical. But I even want to go back just one step further, because from our tradition, it's a fundamental perception. It's stepping into a fundamental perception that is holistic, have a specific view of the universe that you live in and your relationship to the universe prior to starting your practice. In other words, rather than trying to find oneness from your practice, establish oneness as an intention. And at the very beginning, and understand that, in a sense, the worldview that I bring to meditation will unfold. The specific worldview that I bring to my meditation practice will unfold in my meditation practice. So, in other words, if I start with this sense of meditation as first aid, like my meditation is a way of ameliorating my difficulties, that's probably all I'm going to get out of it. And it's not really, it's missing the larger point of our relationship to ourselves, to creator or creation. And if we can start with just taking a minute or two to reflect on the higher, more noble perceptions that come from tradition, by the way, because this point of view I'm generally describing is not common language. It's not, you won't find it on Instagram. It's deeply embedded in our spiritual DNA. And that's the vision that these great sages and the lineage holders shared. And so what I would say is, if one could draw from the greatest and noble truths and let that be the first step in moving into stillness or moving towards stillness, that would change our practice.
So is meditation also a search for truth? Deepak? You think so?
Yeah, it's only about that, actually. Search for truth. But I just one or two things to what Rod said. Intention has many levels. So if Sanskrit is a language that has these nuances that can't be expressed in English. There are levels of intention in Sanskrit, para, pashanti, madhyama, vekari. So at a very subtle level, you may not be aware of your intentions because they are those sanskaras as a result of karma. And meditation allows you to have clarity of that. What is the essence of the subtlest intention? At a superficial level, your intention could be, I want a new car, or I want a private plane, or I want to marry this girl, or whatever. But as you go deeper, then the intentions obviously change. They become, I think ultimately the subtlest intention is, who am I? Beyond all this, who am I? And if you can just even not think about it, because the highest level is choiceless awareness, where you are not consciously making any choice or intention. In that you allow for lack of a better word, the greater intention of the universe to express itself through you in that choiceless being.
My own point of view, I've always said that the quality of my life would be determined in part by the questions I ask myself. Rinpoche, when you think about your practice and talking to your students, what questions do you encourage them to consider?
Who am I? I think that's an important question now, and I would almost say, who are we as humanity at this point? I'm very just struck by the relationship between personal meditation and practice, and also how it's connecting with what's happening in society. And I also have some question of, as meditation is becoming more and more normalized and seen as a really good way to relate with stress and to connect with some centering and strength. I'm also noticing that there's a lot more sort of stress and depression and anger that's in society that's loading up our minds, and so there's a real connection between the questions that we ask in meditation are not just simply for our own enlightenment, but how do you have social enlightenment? How do you have... so that's why I'm saying it's who are we as people? And if we're living in a culture where we fundamentally don't believe that a human being can have wakefulness or enlightenment or these qualities, what are we saying about ourselves? And as a culture... So to me, meditation is really mixed with the culture which it came from, like the time of the Buddha. He was asking very profound questions. And I almost feel like we can ask those same questions, but we're also asking modern questions about where are we right now as people and why are we meditating and doing yoga. And it's, there is some intelligence to that. It's not just wanting answers. And in that way, I feel like, especially when you're doing more complicated practices in pujas, it's asking the questions, and through meditation, you're not being given the answer, but you're exploring the answer.
That's right. Well, I've taken a class with you where you talked about using meditation to train your mind. Don't let the mind, it'll go where it wants to go, and for a lot of us, that's our problem, And how would you like to comment on that?
Is this where I get to rail against social media? This is my moment? In the end, please understand that yoga is a mind game. It's a game of the mind. This is an enterprise about the mind. I'll often say, I think I said it in class today, that the Buddha didn't have any different instruments than you and I have. That any enlightened being doesn't have, really, there was nothing unique about them as a creature. They have the exact same instruments. And yet, what made a Buddha, if I may, Rinpoche, is perception. Is moving from one kind of perception to the next. And that's all about the mind. The core of yoga is mind. And, you know, it's easy to get distracted in the gymnastics related to moving your body and stuff like that. I'm not telling my students anything they haven't heard before. So it's absolutely about mind. And the challenge that we face, I think, is that culturally and because of technology and stuff, our minds are fundamentally becoming more feeble. When I grew up, before I remember the transition to answering machines, so I just turned 60, so that gives you some idea, but I remember in the early 80s, suddenly there was an answering machine. Suddenly, you came home and you found out who called you while you were away. Now, before that, you didn't know who called you, and you were just fine. You didn't know who called you while you were not home. Now, the point I'm making is all of this instantaneous. So what I started to say was that I remembered probably I had at my disposal 40 or 50 phone numbers. How many phone numbers do most of us have access to in our memory? 2, 3, 4. In general, our minds are atrophying because of technology. And this is actually, I think, going to make meditation, and particularly getting to the depths of what I think the three of us have been talking about today, getting to the depths of it requires a stable, clear, calm, tranquil mind that has high level of memory, that has high retentive power, for a variety of reasons. So that's why today I made the case that moving your body is important and helpful for a variety of reasons, but moreover, it's the breath. The breath is the real shift in the mind. One of the things I say is that when you do posture, you're working effectively, you're interfacing with your past. Because your body is your material memory. What you eat, what you've thought, what activities you've done are essentially recorded by your body all the time. So when you do asana, you're interacting with your past more than anything else. When you breathe, you're interacting primarily with the present. Because you can't shape your breath consciously and not be more present. And when you meditate, you're primarily interacting with the future. And if we understand, really, it's about mind. It has to be about mind.
Well, Rinpoche, what does meditation teach you in the Buddhist tradition about mind?
Well, one thing I just want to comment on what Rod is saying is that, like, one word for meditation in Tibetan is chimpa, and that's been translated as mindfulness. And mindfulness also just basically means memory, to remember. So it's remembering the present moments and remembering the breath. So it's that notion of recollection. And, when the early teachings of the Buddha were given, he taught for over 50 years after his enlightenment. And his teachings that we have now, which are hundreds of volumes of teachings and commentaries, are also his close students saying, this is what I remembered. And so almost everything is, and we say, thus have I heard. And these are the, just like as we're doing, except there was no recording devices, obviously. So it was a meditation just to listen. It wasn't like, I'll take notes or whatever, I'll check it out later. But you realize this is it. And the fact that the mind could have that kind of precision, it's almost like we can't quite believe it. But it's amazing what the mind is capable of. And I feel like that's part of discovering the strength and stability of the mind. So, I was very curious to hear in terms of you talking about yoga, in terms because it's mostly people do see it as a physical activity, and my understanding from Buddhist point of view, because there's yoga in Buddhism, is that it is really the point of the postures is getting to the sense of jnana or wisdom, and then getting into that aspect. So, that's great here.
So Deepak, tell us about the breath and meditation and how it impacts the mind. And then tell us where the mind is.
I want to again clarify some nuances because we're all speaking in English right now. And the word mindfulness is part of our cultural language. But the awareness of the mind is not the mind, right? The awareness of a thought is not a thought. Rinpoche used the word remembrance. Okay. The thought is an object of experience. The mind is an object of experience. Also, it's a shifting object of experience because it's never still. It's a fluctuation, what in Sanskrit is called vritti. It's a fluctuation of your being. Now, mindfulness is a word that's here to stay, but unless you know the nuances of the original Sanskrit or Pali, the proper word, which would be a very clumsy word in English, would be awarefulness. Awareness of the mind, awareness of emotions, awareness of perception, awareness of the body, awareness of that which we call body, mind, and word. So what is the mind? It's a fluctuation. It's a fluctuation of being, it's a fluctuation of consciousness, it's an excitation of consciousness, and it is actually always a result of conditioning of the past. Sanskaras and vasanas are fluctuations. So you have only two kinds of thoughts, ultimately, about the past and about the future. But you, who's having the thought, is neither in the past nor in the future. You're now, and now is not a moment in time. Now is a state of being in which those fluctuations are arising and subsiding eternally and ceaselessly, creating the concept of time.
What do you think of time?
I'd actually like...
Is that so abstract?
Very straightforward. So I thought so. That's why I'm a big fan. But to summarize what Deepak said in a different way, I have bad news. There's no such thing as peace of mind. There's only mind or peace. Peace is the absence of the movement of mind.
Yeah.
I'd rather answer that in time.
So, let's talk about for a second the essence of duality. Deepak, can you give us a little bit of your view on the essence of non-duality?
Non-duality is actually the tradition we are talking about. All of us ultimately are talking about non-duality, Advaita, which means fundamental reality is only one, without a second, non-dual. And that fundamental reality is immaterial. It's not a physical fundamental reality. And that fundamental reality is all there is. Everything else is an appearance and disappearance in that fundamental reality. It is of the nature of awareness. So, if you were to derive 4 or 5 principles from this, some of which I've already stated, but the first principle is everything that you're experiencing right now, or have experienced, is a result of the conditioned mind, projecting itself as experience. And the conditioning is very deep. It's not only your parents and your ancestors, it's your culture, it's your history, it's your religion, it's whatever theology, philosophy you were exposed to, it's even scientific, it's economic. So everything that's happening right now is a result of the conditioned mind. Principle number 2, that which you call me or I is also a conditioned self, which has no fundamental essence. It's a differentiated expression of the original mind or the original self. So the conditioned identity is experiencing the conditioned environment. Principle number 3, which I already said, now is not a moment of time, now is the essence of awareness in which there is this ceaseless activity that we call the mind. Principle number 4, the real you which is beyond the mind, was never born and is not subject to death. And the reason for that is that the real you is without form, experiencing itself as all this. Formless being is experiencing itself as this, all this. So that's why it is, first of all, not in time. Secondly, it's imperishable. It's indestructible. And all our suffering comes from that which is the attachment to the idea of impermanence, so that which is perishable. So when we truly become non-dual, not just understand non-dual, that is liberation, that is freedom.
Yes. In a few minutes, we're going to try an experiment to get at the essence of non-duality, which is going to be this fantastic meditation with these three masters. But before I started, I want to see if the Rinpoche or Rod would like to comment on Deepak's comments on the essence of non-duality. Rod, you want to?
No, I actually stay away from conversations of non-duality. I
have them every day.
I mean, Deepak has such a brilliant scientist mind that he can really. It's almost as like we're watching him paint a painting that describes it. But ultimately, it's beyond description. So there's actually a mantra in my lineage that basically only fools wade in to talk about duality or non-duality. And then it says only the Lord knows this answer. No, I don't know. Duality? Here's something.
Raise your hand first.
Duality is teenagers. Non-duality is oneness. That's my life in a nutshell. But I just want to make the point, that ultimately, and I had the pleasure and the honor to spend some time with both these gentlemen last night, and I shared my thought that in a sense, non-duality is, while it is the quintessence and the ultimate arrival of these practices, and there's no doubt that with time and dedication, you will get to know it if you are truly dedicated. But in the meantime, it's not all it's cracked up to be. For most of us, we still have a lot of work to discharge in the world, and in non-dual reference, if you will, perspective, the days of the week are non-existent. The time it is, everyone here was in a timely manner. We all kind of observing silence. Silence and non-silence is duality. Hunger and not hungry is duality. So, and if you begin to read the accounts of people who actually enter that state, they have to be reminded to eat. They have to be reminded. And Ramana Maharishi, who you brought up, Deepak, he taught where he slept, and he slept where he taught, and he was told to eat because he wasn't hungry. So it's really not what I would call it. I would call it the ultimate retirement practice. In the meantime, how do we navigate fear? How do we navigate anxiety? How do we navigate sadness? How do we navigate disappointment? How do we navigate our attachments? Duality is not the answer for everything. Non-duality is not the answer for everything. Ultimately, of course, it is, because it's all there is. But at the same time, and I think you were speaking to this very wisely, Rinpoche, which was, I loved what you said. It's my big takeaway. The wisdom in our confusion. It's really coming to greater clarity about how we navigate the dualistic world skillfully. In non-dualism, there aren't Republicans and Democrats. There isn't money being taken away from certain social issues as we speak. So I don't want to quite cut the thread to duality quite yet. I want to continue to hone my skill in entering into this other level of experience.
But you want to be aware. You want to be aware that it exists.
Both dualistically, and it's really only at the end of your life, when you're going to retire, you start embarking on non-dualistic practices. It's not going to work. It's going to take many diluting the cloth's color or dye, many of those experiences to ultimately be able to rest in this place that we're talking about.
Before you go to
Yeah,
Rinpoche,
yeah.
very well said, but here's one thing we should clarify. Everything that we call civilization and even science is based on duality, subject-object split, me and you, me and the universe. When we engage in science included, is based on the subject-object split. And science is great, it makes our life comfortable, gives us technologies. But do remember that science, or let's say the misuse of science, based on a misunderstanding of reality, which is beyond subject-object split, right? The subject-object split is artificial. We have climate change, we have eco-destruction, we have extinction of species, we have poison in our food chain, we have mechanized death, we have atomic bombs and nuclear weapons, which is the karma of duality. And we are risking our extinction because of that. So while to engage in this world, we do need the perception of me and you, me and the other. If we are not aware that the other is me in a different uniform, then we go to these extremes, risking our extinction.
We won't have time for questions. Rod's going to lead off the meditation. We're going to pass the baton to the Rinpoche and then to Deepak. But I do want to say that the last time I moderated a panel with the Rinpoche, there was a question from the audience, and I want to repeat that question for the audience. And the question was, what will you say on your deathbed? Rinpoche, would you answer that for us?
With that.
I was very wrong.
I won't say anything.
You're the perfect lead down into the meditation. So everyone will just take their seats. I'll pass it over to Rod. Yeah. Rinpoche, my apologies.
The one thing that the three of us discussed last night, Jerry, behind your back, this is clearly, I think everyone understands that any one of us, and one of the three of us, could lead a complete meditation practice with the beginning, middle, and end. But we emails went back and forth, and we began to coordinate and sense perhaps what we could contribute to a compilation, an orchestration with the beginning, middle, end, and meditation practice. So I thought it would be useful if each of us create just a little bit of context, just 1 or 2 minutes context about the portion of meditation that we lead you through, and that way it can be done seamlessly. And then if I may just say one other thing, that Deepak is going to lead the last stage. Deepak has a plane to catch, and really a plane to catch, which means, and we're grateful you're staying here for the very end. But when he at one point will close meditation and lead us into silence, and he will be gone. I just wanted to warn them, given this whole non-dual.
The body will be. I'd say that.
And we'll say he was never born. So I thought maybe if we each took a minute or two just to contextualize the portion of the practice.
For my portion, what I've said is the context.
Okay. Or should I go and just speak?
No, I can. So I just want to share before I lead the meditation that I'm from the Shambhala tradition of open heart warriorship, and really the notion of life is the notion of how we engage with a sense of bravery and how we can actually create a good human society from our practice. And just when we were hearing the discussions on non-dual, my father, the Venerable Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, was a great Tibetan master. And he escaped from Tibet and then came west, and he's known, some of you know who he is, as being one of the main people to bring Buddhism to the West. He founded Yogarupa University and has really taught for a long time. And so he was, I would say, one of the last great beings who received kind of the spiritual essence of Buddhism within Tibet that had been there for almost untouched for 1,500 years. And so then it was then kind of dramatically and sort of violently sort of left. And so we had 80,000 Tibetans who escaped to India. And then he came west. He studied at Oxford University, learned English, understood culture, and he came, and you know, just as an anecdote, when I was very young, I was curious about what enlightenment was too, and all this non-dual talk. And so I said very innocently, I said, "So what happens when you get enlightened?" And he goes, and he had a very high voice. He goes, "Well, then you go to work." And I wasn't ready to hear that. But basically, you have to just live another day. And it was a real transmission that, as fantastic as it all is, it really comes back down to how we relate with who we are. And so one of the main feelings I got from him was just his warmth. And since we're really talking about lineage, and I just felt like it was about human warmth that had kept us alive. It was one person loving another person, caring. And that's how the meditation has been passed on. And even though it has all the scientific backing now, I think if it's going to go forward, it's going to just take good-heartedness from us. So I would just, like to offer that. I know there's a lot of different kinds of techniques of meditation here. And so I feel like at some point we're all human, and we can decide on what, how we want to go forward and how we want to think about life. And so, to me, meditation always starts with just feeling. And sometimes, right as you sit down to meditate, you sometimes want to avoid yourself. So rather than just immediately trying to avoid yourself, I say, just allow yourself to feel and not feel bad about it. So if you feel good, I say it's good, good. If you feel bad, it's bad, good. It's good. And good not in a dualistic way, obviously, after all this, but just good in some sort of primordial way, some healthiness. And actually the word I am well has the root of good. And good means complete. Complete means circular. Humanity is not deficient. It is not at fault. So if we meditate with guilt, then we meditate from fault. It always feels like we're trying to do surgery on ourselves, getting rid of something. So can we connect with our humanity? So if you like, we can just give that, and then we'll be led further. So just exhale. And then there's no particular focus here, not even on the breath. You just allow yourself to feel how you feel. And feeling is not just minor sensations. It's not just minor thoughts. But it is us as a human being exploring and communicating. In a very intuitive way. Feeling is just us contextualizing who we are as human beings. And when we feel, we're not making it up. We just feel how we feel. And let ourselves just accept that. Everyone feels. And sometimes we have our feelings hurt. So we try to stop feeling. When we stop feeling, we are slowly dying. In this way, feeling is healing. And because it is hard to feel in the past, try to feel in the future. Feeling is very immediate. And just by feeling, it allows us to begin to build a bridge with others. We don't care how we feel. We don't care how others feel. So by simply feeling, we are celebrating our life and existence. All our sense faculties are awakened. We are letting humanity feel. feeling, we are being who we are. To offer a chant as a way of blessing and creating good intention for our practice, for all of your practices, for our practice. Chant is known as the 8 noble auspicious ones, creating auspiciousness and conditions for practice and our life. Dame Jaba Jaban Jaba Koba Koba Sara Session Tajan Tajeda is on the border. Session Tabe Tajeba Java Tera Jaba Chada Java Jesago Giso Java Tajeba Java Chasava Samba Jimba Meda Hajabudan the Manzananda Tisha. Some Nissan Gilly Jazz, but you can Joa Java Jazava. The Magis are home. Control Mambo Guru Jinjis. The Magis are the lies and Jugin Buddha from the Jinjis of Jaya Gandra Zambema Gizon Bamba is in Julia Moro. Jinja Jesu da
next stage of practice is to continue to keep your eyes closed. Tradition speaks to the idea that the light of the heart we can follow it and use it as our guide, leads to what it describes as the highest fortune, a life of richness and profound and sublime satisfaction. It also says before we can know that light, that light of the heart has to be purified. And so I thought we'd just begin by just doing a very quick, short exercise. And we will shine a light on our judgment of others. And before that, we'll actually develop a quality within ourselves of forgiveness. With your eyes closed, begin to think or reflect upon a time where you hurt yourself, where you didn't honor your own hurt feelings, where you either dismissed yourself or exercised intense self-criticism. Now, in the calm hours of this afternoon, you consciously begin to practice self-acceptance. Reflecting how you can forgive, accept, and love yourself now. So where have you harmed yourself? Where have you separated yourself? Where have you hung on to inner conflict? And sitting quietly for the next minute or two, just practice supreme self-acceptance. Forgive yourself for the pain that you've created for yourself. And give yourself the self-love and self-acceptance that will heal that wound. Now, it should be clear that this is a long practice, one that we can cultivate for weeks and months to really establish the complete healing that it offers us. Let's take one more step, a similar contemplation, and that is someone to whom you are judgmental, you have anger toward, you have frustration about. And begin to create a new context. And that's truly the idea, is that the context of them either harming or hurting you is based on them only doing what they knew to do. Their limited awareness, their limited understanding. This is a more difficult practice because it asks us to unload a burden that we've spent a lot of time thinking about, dwelling on, having remorse about, anger. The action here is to understand the context of those who've hurt us as being rooted in their lack of clear apprehension, their lack of clear understanding. In other words, they did the best they could. And you see them in the light of their limited understanding. And you accept them as such. In time and with practice, the basis for our resentments are resolved. Now please, in your own way, begin to contextualize this light of the self that we've been talking about today. In various traditions depicted in a variety of ways. One that we see consistently in the Upanishadic literature is that there's a flame in the heart, about the size of your thumb. This is the source, the self. And if you're not a good visualizer, please don't work hard at this. It can be a feeling. It can be a sensation. A sensation of a flame. Almond-shaped, golden yellow, smokeless flame in the heart. Now observe that each time your body breathes in, this is involuntary, it's not ujjayi, it's not pranayama. Each time your body breathes in, this seed of love, compassion, and wisdom expands. Each time your body breathes out, this light of love and compassion and jnana, wisdom, and prajna, concentrates back to a single flame. It's okay if you need to stretch your legs out. You won't be here that much longer, but be comfortable. Just for a couple more minutes. This light, this effulgence of the self expands when your body breathes in, contracts when your body breathes out. In time, you'll have the experience of moving out of your head and into your heart. You'll transition from an intention to entering into a relationship with that flame. Till eventually you become the flame, aware of itself. The culmination of this practice is the sense, the experience that you need nothing or no one to be complete. Ananda Shakti. In the calm hours of this day, you experience having all your desires fulfilled. There's nothing to want. Being and becoming have submerged, have merged. Finally, the understanding is that if we follow this light, we serve this light, we'll be moved by love, moved to exercise compassion. It's literally by being moved by this light, by being touched by it, become conscious that we're always being guided. Sampradaya is the word for tradition in Sanskrit. It means that which is always giving, always providing, always nurturing. Feel the pulse of that light. And let it show you the way ahead to your deepest knowing.
And now, keep your awareness in your heart and mentally ask the question, who am I? 2 times. Allowing any sensation, image, feeling or thought to spontaneously arise or subside. Who am I? Who or what am I? Keeping your awareness in the same place, the heart, ask the question, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? Allowing any sensation, image, feeling or thought to spontaneously arise and subside. Moving on, awareness in the heart. What am I grateful for? What am I grateful for? Allowing any sensation, image, feeling or thought to arise and subside. What am I grateful for? And now, moving to a new phase of the meditation, please mentally repeat your full name to yourself. I am Deepak Chopra. I am Gina Murdoch. I am, and your first name and your last name. And now, in this moment, allow all your concerns, all your worries, all your duties, all your obligations, all your stresses, invite them into your awareness. Allow your awareness to fill up with all that is arising in your life right now as sensations, images, feelings, or thoughts. And now please drop your last name and just repeat your first name attached to I am. I am Deepak. I am Jerry. I am Gina. Just the first name. And in this moment, allow any memories, any images, any thoughts, any feelings from your childhood to arise and flicker in and out of your awareness. Bring back any experiences, any sanskaras, any thoughts, any notions from when you were less than 12. And now let go of your first name and just repeat, I am, with no name attached to it. I am, just I am. And this time, let any memories, any thoughts, any images slowly detach as you just repeat, I am. If you want, you can replace I am with aham. Aham. And now let go of aham and just rest in being. Rest in existence. Rest in awareness. Be aware of being aware. Just be. in this settled state of being or awareness, ask the question, what is it that knows my experience of mind, body, or world? Who or what knows the mind? In the same stillness, ask, does awareness have a religion? Ask, does awareness have a nationality? Ask, does awareness have a race? Ask, does awareness have a location? Ask, is awareness in time? That which we call I is this awareness. Ask, does awareness have an age? Is it 25 years old, 69 years old? The answers should be obvious here. So the next few minutes, just rest in being. Just rest in existence. Just rest in that which is both existence and the knowing of existence.